Good afternoon and welcome. I'm David Celdran. Today we've come to celebrate the indomitable Filipino spirit embodied in national artist and architect Francisco Bobby Mañosa, whose love of local cultures and traditions are manifested in his design aesthetics and evident in all his works. From fields and mountains to traditional patterns, and most especially the humble Bahay Kubo, he took inspiration from ethnic Filipino elements and reimagined them into some of his greatest works. Looking at the Coconut Palace, the San Miguel Corporate Building, and the EDSA Shrine, it's easy to see the masterful manner in which he weaves a Filipino soul into his works. Despite being a mentor to many, he remained a learner of life, continuing to study and master his craft through astute observation and meticulous practice to the end of his days. Bobby Mañosa studied the local landscape so he could shape horizons, and today we celebrate not just a great man, but the legacy, the Filipino fervor he leaves behind.
Allow me to congratulate you and thank you for your contribution to the practice of architecture in our country. We consider you as an icon, as a legacy. What you have done will go beyond the books.
Through design that really identifies the culture of the country.
There's not enough words to describe what you've done, but I think the most appropriate one would be legacy. If there's one architect who will perfectly depict Philippine architecture, it's you.
Architecture must start with that Bahay Kubo. And through this Bahay Kubo, we must evolve simply because it's an indigenous house.
I think you got across finally to the Filipino why you have been so passionate about Filipino architecture.
The use of indigenous materials has always been a passion for me. It's now an upliftment of what the bamboo is or what the coconut tree is all about. Mm-hmm. The main theme behind this is to accept the material and get all of us in unison to just say what is ours is beautiful.
Tito Bob, I love you so much, and I was so happy to be part of this celebration of your 86th birthday. And I know that Daddy is looking down at you and smiling and very proud of you, Tito Bob. Love you from Mañosa, San Juan.
Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you were happily surprised by what you saw today. This is actually maybe just 1/4 of your archives that we put out here. I was actually very, very pleasantly surprised by what we were able to find, and seeing everything, we realized that this cannot just be a one-time exhibit. I think we need to go through several more because there's so much more to show about your life and your work and everything you've done out there to share your blessings with others.
Just like Una, Hidalgo, and the other artists in this museum, Architect Mañosa is, of course, a man who is truly passionate about his craft and unapologetic about his pursuit of excellence.
Father, we thank you for the gift of Bobby to our country. Thank you because through his designs, he keeps our national identity intact in our hearts.
Here we see projects speaks louder than words.
I hope all the architects, the young architects, come to know what it is that you have been doing.
The people around you, the people who follow you, the people who admire you, these are also a reflection of who you are and what you have done and what you have contributed.
Masaya po ako at ngayon meron po tayong isang exhibit na ganito na kung saan pwede naming imbitahin ang aming mga estudyante sa School of Architecture nang makita nila kung ano ang ating pwedeng gawin para magkaroon po talaga tayo ng isang Filipino identity.
His body of work has steered and moved a generation of architects and has become a cornerstone, pillar, and pinnacle of Philippine neo-vernacular architecture. His architecture is a poetic response to the philosophical question of his career, why Filipino?
When you continue to share your passion for music, and the type of passion that you shared with us with your music is the same type of passion that we are seeing here now with this really, really important and historic display of your architectural works.
One, you must accept you're a Filipino. Two, you must accept that you must love the country. And third, let us practice architecture.
In fact, I am just humbled and grateful and thankful that I had the chance to step into your firm and be able to see your projects and be able to create with you.
One eye must see architecture, the other one must feel. There's no other way you can decide Pinoy. You must feel it, you must know you are a Filipino.
His design, his architecture, his Filipino house, the Filipino spirit that he just keeps alive through generations. And I thank him so much for this timeless legacy that he's giving us.
Happy birthday, Bobby. Wasn't this a great surprise for you? 86, wow.
We, the Filipino architects, are grateful and thankful for your contribution. And rest assured, we as your witness will continue that legacy and make sure that it is applied, it is implemented, and it is ingrained in our designs. Thank you, Tito Bobby, for everything that you've done. You've done remarkable things, and it will greatly be appreciated.
I'd like to welcome Bambi Mañosa Tanhutco, only daughter of architect Bobby Mañosa and president of the Museo Pambata, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the launch of the MAñOSA Beyond Architecture book. On behalf of our family and the Tukad Foundation, thank you very much for being here. We are so happy that we finally got to do this. You know, 3 years ago, when my father received a message from a student, it read, "Dear Architect Mañosa, I wish you could talk to my professor in architecture because my professor says there is no such thing as Filipino architecture." My father, already frail from a lingering illness, slowly looked at me and said, "Who's talking to these students now? Do they know about Filipino architecture?" Looking back, I see that my father's practice was actually an advocacy more than it was a business. So my mom and I got together under our Tukad Foundation and decided to let his archives do the talking. We tapped architect Gerard Lico and Patrick Flores to help us mount it. And as we shared my father's life with them, and the course of this talking and making cuento about, you know, everything about my dad and the kind of person that he was, they realized also that, you know, my dad was actually more than just an architect. So we decided then to share as well his passion for music, for play, for craft, product design, because my father was quite a creative creature. He designed everything from toys to giant slides. He was a self-taught pianist. He loved music, from composing lullabies to playing with the executive's band to raise funds for charity. He never considered himself an artist, but sketched, drew, and painted like one. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough space at the museum for us to show everything we wanted to share, but I believe it was enough to jumpstart the conversation again. Why Filipino? We decided to open the exhibit on his birthday, February 12, a perfect time to celebrate his 86 years in existence. What many didn't know was that he was mostly asleep for 5 days before the exhibit opening. We thought he wouldn't make it, and we were already preparing to open the exhibit without him being there. But lo and behold, that afternoon, he woke up upon hearing his helpers sing "Happy Birthday" at the top of their lungs. You can imagine how thrilled we were when my mom called me and she said, "He's up and we're on our way." To see my dad arrive at the National Museum surrounded by his friends, family, colleagues, and clients, then to see him see his body of work in a well-curated exhibit was beyond words. To have the opportunity to honor my father this way was truly special, and it will always and forever be ingrained in my heart. He went back around 5 to 6 times in the course of the 3 months that the exhibit was up. If he was any healthier, he would have been there every single week, talking to every single one. It was always a thrill for him to see students with their professors, and much more when we would take home all the notes and letters that each and every one wrote for him. So he enjoyed listening to them, so much so that he asked me to write back or to message some of them. So I believe some of you got messages from him, or maybe even like a little video clip from him. So to all of you who wrote to him, thank you very much, because that totally filled his heart. My father was a man with so much soul. He was full of charisma and kindness with an amazing zest for life. So much so that he always left an imprint on everyone that he met. He used to say that an architect's body of work is never his alone. Much credit goes to the many designers that have come on board at some point in this journey, especially those who have stayed. A special mention goes out to architect Ludwig Alvarez, his wingman and his best friend for many, many years. And the pillars, of course, of the past, like Chelo Hofilenia, Henry Berloa, Danny Chauco, Stanley Fernandez, and my mom, Denise Mañosa, who stood by him and supported my dad through thick and thin. Thank you, Mom, for all those years. Plus many others who I am so sure you all know who you are. A big thank you to everybody who has walked through my father's doors and through our office. And up to this day, those who are still with us, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Credit as well goes to our clients who believed in his mission and gave him a platform to push Filipino architecture to new heights. He used to give so much time to architecture and interior design students as well, whether he was an invited speaker or be it an interview in his office, a tour of his home, an out-of-town trip to lecture in a university somewhere far away. He was always talking and teaching and preaching and giving students time. He used to say, "They are my barangay, the youth who will continue my mission." His energy was fueled by passion for his mission. It's been 3 years since this exhibit, 2 years today since he received his National Artist Award, October 24, and a year and a half since his passing. My father talked so much throughout his life that I can still hear his voice resonating in my head up to this day. I believe my father's voice will resonate beyond the grave for many, many, many years to come. His philosophy will carry through his family, his firm, his clients, his suppliers, our Tukod Foundation, and through all of you, his barangay. It was our Tukod Foundation's mission to travel the exhibit around the Philippines, but with COVID season, we never know how long this is going to take. So we decided to finish this monograph and bring the exhibit to all of you in the comfort of your homes. We hope you enjoy leafing through the pages and join us in our quest to push our love for Philippine culture, design, and country to new heights. On behalf of my mom and our family and the Tukod Foundation, maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Bambi. Last February 2017, on the occasion of architect Bobby Mañosa's 86th birthday, the Tukod Foundation arranged an inspiring exhibit entitled MAñOSA Beyond Architecture at the National Museum. It featured some of his most iconic works and designs from the archives rarely seen. Today, in lieu of a physical display, the Tukod Foundation, together with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, brings you the newly released monograph of this exhibit. Here, the author, architect Gerard Lico, shares with us an in-depth study on architect Bobby Mañosa's body of work.
I think it really speaks so much of who Tito Bobby is, who Bobby Mañosa is, and what he has contributed to the practice of architecture.
To know what it is that you have been doing. It has been prototype after prototype after prototype. I mean, just bring pleasantness into the Filipino's life. That's super, Bobby.
It exhibits the indigenous talent that our forefathers had in terms of architecture. This is something that we should never take for granted.
It's our call for them to think of what is Filipino, to upgrade and uplift the design to a level that is acceptable and beautiful also internationally.
This one is an eye-opener. They will see essentially what Bobby Mañosa has done in the industry of architecture. Action speaks louder than words. Here we see projects speaks louder than words. Your projects are a reflection of your commitment to the practice, the people around you, the people who follow you, the people who admire you. These are also a reflection of who you are and what you have done and what you have contributed.
As the original curator of the exhibit at the National Museum, architect Gerard Lico was the unquestionable choice to voice out its greatest highlights through this monograph. A professor at the College of Architecture in the University of the Philippines, Diliman, he is currently a practicing architect specializing in the design and conservation of institutional buildings, a proud, prolific author of publications on Filipino architecture and cultural studies. Architect Lico is also a curator of architectural exhibitions and director of Philippine art and architecture documentaries. He served as consulting architect for the rehabilitation of the Rizal Memorial Coliseum in 2019 and currently serves as consulting architect for the conservation of heritage sites in the city of Valenzuela and the Diplomat Hotel in Baguio City. Let's all please welcome architect Gerard Lico.
Francisco Mañosa, Architect Bobby to many, was a stalwart of Philippine architecture. He is best remembered for his dedication and love for designing Filipino. Kakakitaan ang kanyang mga gusali ng hiwaga at pagkamalikaing diwa, bunga ng kanyang haraya. Sinasalamin ng kanyang mga likha ang kanyang panghabang buhay na pagkabighani sa mga natatanging posibilidad ng ating likas yaman at hulagway ng ating kulturang taal. His exploration on the possibilities of Filipino vernacular sensibilities and elements opened many doors for contemporary Filipino design to flourish. His body of works also shows us that one's sustained creativity and zest for life comes from having many passions and interests that are shared wholeheartedly with many people and the community. 4 years ago, Bambi approached me with an idea of an exhibit on her father, Bobby MAÑOSA. It was then that I really got to know architect Bobby better, when I was allowed access to his archive to select the materials for a major exhibition at the National Museum. We wanted to show through the exhibition that architect Bobby is not just a neo-vernacular architectural pioneer. He was also a theorist, an inventor, a community worker, a church benefactor, a toy designer, and a jazz musician, among many others. Mababatid na ang eksibisyong ito ay isa sa pinakadinaluhang pagtatanghal ng sining sa pambansang museo. Dahil rito, minabuti ng aming panig na maipaabot ang nilalaman nito sa mas nakakaraming tao, una sa pamamagitan ng pagbuo ng traveling exhibit at ngayon sa pamamagitan ng aklat na ating inilulunsad. The book, MAÑOSA Beyond Architecture, looks back at the life and contribution of the great architect to the lives of Filipinos and serves as a monograph for the exhibition. Continuing the journey that began in 2017 when I first opened the exhibition, this book is dedicated to the students and professional architect Bobby referred to as his barangay. Higit sa lahat ng aklat na ito, maipapaabot sa susunod pang henerasyon ng mga mag-aaral ang hamon ng pagpapalawig sa bokabularyo ng arkitekturang Filipino. In a current environment, the need to adapt and be creative is much needed. We hope through this book, you will be encouraged by architect Bobby's creative journey and find inspiration in your own many pursuits to further and grow as a designer and as a Filipino. Mabuhay, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
A stunning career such as that of architect Bobby MAÑOSA's has naturally garnered ardent followers and inspired students of architecture and design from all over. And we'd like to thank everyone who sent their video testimonials. Thank you so much. Architect Lico has chosen 5 young aspirants who were able to best express how architect Bobby MAñOSA's life and work has inspired them in their own endeavors.
Architect Francisco Bobby MAñOSA. Ako ay isang arkitektong Filipino at Filipino lang ang aking disenyo. Namulat ang aking mga mata sa realidad ng arkitektong Filipino. Libu-libong arkitekto pero iilan lamang ang tumatangkilik sa sariling atin. Ngunit, pinatunayan niya na ang bahay kubo at bahay na bato ay nananalaytay sa ating dugo. Ito ang ating kultura na dapat nating pagyaman. MAñOSA Beyond Architecture.
May inspire ko kung architect MAñOSA kasi akakit ko pa rin gawa ng pagkatao. Siyempre bilang simpleng Pilipinong kapampangan na manok ng ulod na rin marakalatanaman, atunod ko pa rin itang ating kangkulya na tahimik at payapang ipagpainuan. May ngarapan ko ining buri kong idalay ni aling mo para ka rin magwalta dun karing kapara tapong makaka. MAñOSA Beyond Architecture.
Naimbag nga aldaw ka barangay MAñOSA.
Pakabigbigan. Daytoy tinaisang sangayan a balikas, nga umapay iti panuno. No inak mangagan, tinagan nga architect Francisco Bobby MAñOSA. Isukot may saa pagwadan, ang mga laalukoy, ni inak panangipan nakal, tinagtaudak akuli. Ikinatao, ken katatao. Kaskan kuana, kanayon ang maimaldi ti puso ken nakampo, amang ipugas ti tatak ikinatao, ti anyaman nga disenyo, akas may nga agad-adal ti kina-arkitekto. Isu ti mga lukoy kanyak, tapno maalukyak. Manyosa Beyond Architecture.
Paano ko naging inspirasyon si Architect Francisco Bobby Mañosa? Simple lang, naging ko siyang inspirasyon nung siya'y 17 anyos pa sana. Aram niya na sa sadiri niya na maadal siyang arkitektura. Saro sa mga sabi niya na nagpukaw sa sakuyang sadiri, ang sarong malsok ay dapat nakakailing sa arkitektura. Asin ang saro ay dapat nakakamati. Warang ibang dalan para magdisenyo ng Pilipino. Dapat na mamatian mo. Dapat aram mong saro kang Pilipino. Mañosa Beyond Architecture.
When I was young, family and I used to go to one of the hotels in EDSA, and around that area is a San Miguel Corporation building. As a kid, to me, it didn't seem like a building. It looked like Banawi rice terraces. Years later, I would take architecture as my degree, and seeing the work of architect Bobby Mañosa was one of those little moments that led to the decision. Truly, Mañosa is beyond architecture.
I'd now like to introduce architect Jello Mañosa, son of architect Bobby Mañosa, who will share a few words about his father's legacy.
It was a celebration of Dad's work spanning over 50 years of soul-searching, researching, understanding what exactly was his sense of purpose in Philippine architecture. As he starts looking at the past designs of our forefathers who gave us the Bahay Kubo and then later evolved into the Bahay na Bato, he then asks the question, what is next for Philippine architecture? How do we give continuity to the evolution of our culture as a people? How do we elevate a sense of pride in innovative Philippine design? And why should a Filipino even care? To the many skeptics who would preach that there is no such thing as Philippine architecture, Dad would simply reply, then isn't it about time we started? We at the Mañosa firm challenge ourselves with these questions every day with Dad's ideology that architecture must be true to itself, its land, and her people. This ideology makes us wake up every day and showcase the best of Philippine design to the world. Not just in architecture, but in anything we design that seeks to answer all those questions. This is our sense of purpose. This is our contribution to the Philippines, to the Filipino, and to Philippine architecture. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much. That was architect Jello Mañosa. Thank you so much for that message about the legacy of his father, his life, and his work. So I'm going to call him back in, and you have him on screen already. Jello Mañosa once again, architect Gerard Lico, the author of the book, and of course the curator of the project. And of course, Bambi Mañosa Tanhutco, one of the daughters, or the daughter actually of architect Bobby, and she continues the legacy of her father through her advocacies. This is your chance to ask them questions. Our three presenters, our three speakers, and we have some questions, in fact, that have come in the chat room, but I have some questions that also came in earlier. So let me just start with a question for architect Gerard. Hi, Gerard. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, here's a question. A lot of us already know about Bobby Mañosa as the national artist, as the legendary architect, his works, and of course, his architectural legacy. But we want to know more about Bobby Mañosa as a person, as a human being, as a friend, or as a mentor. So can you recount for us your first encounter with Bobby, and what was your first impression? And I suppose, did you like him immediately? Jared.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing my master's thesis, it's entitled Edifice Complex. At first, I was skeptical. I'm a critic of the Marcos regime. But when I arrived dun sa office, he welcomed me at siyang unang-unang sinabi niya, pare, kamusta ka? So, first time, pare. So, I feel, parang matagal na kami magkaibigan. So, yung mga, yung mga anti-Marcos, nawala bigla. Tapos, syempre, tinanong ko siya, dun sa regarding sa Coconut Palace, tapos in-explain niya sa akin, hindi lang naman sila Marcos ang ang sinerve niya. Halos lahat ng pangulo ng Pilipinas nag-serve siya as a designer. So yun, medyo nabago yung impression ko, kasi parang parang politicized, parang for me he's a politicized figure, but as I got to know him, he's really a good person, In fact, we met again, in a book award, some time ago. So imagine mo yung dissertation, yung thesis ko, yung master's thesis ko, Edifice Complex, competed with his book, at the National Book Award. Of course, mananalo siya. So I really admire him. I really respected him. Kahit talunan ako, sabi ko, it's quite humbling na matalo ni Bobby Mañosa sa isang book competition. Tapos paradoxically right now I'm the author of a book about him. So it's really he is not just a great architect, but a good person, a good Christian, a philanthropist. So learning about his work, he really gave meaning to what is Filipino, not just architecturally, but bilang tao, ano ang moral compass, and also baka umiyak pa ako dito. So let's continue.
Well, I was asking you about your first impression, and you gave us that first impression. You were disarmed immediately. What about your lasting memories of Bobby? That one memory that you'll keep forever?
Actually, yung when he thanked me during the exhibition. So talagang he held my hand during the exhibit and thanked me. So that was the best moment na feel ko at that time. So it's very simple, and yet for me it's lasting.
That's true. I've had a chance to interact with Bobby myself, and the one thing that you'll always remember is his sincerity. He's a very funny person. He likes to joke a lot. By the end of the day, it's really his sincerity and that captures you most. I want to ask Jello, because he had the privilege of growing up with his father, obviously, unlike us who only just admired him from afar. Jello, the question here is, what qualities of your father, architect Bobby Mañosa, do you think this current generation of students of architecture or even design, or even the younger batch of architects, what qualities do you think they should emulate? Because, every generation thinks differently. But what are those lasting, timeless qualities?
David, one of the things that Dad would always say, which is very, very important, was for us Filipinos to love our country. That was his number one thing is accept who you are, love your country, and then practice architecture. You know, architecture in itself can be taught. You can learn architecture. You can become a very skilled architecture. You know, great architects aren't born. Some of them are born with a gift, yes, creativity, but architecture is a journey. It's developing your journey into maturity, and as you go and as you age through architecture, you go through all these many phases. So you can always teach architecture, but being able to love your country, accepting who you are as a Filipino, knowing your identity, that's a little different. You know, you can't teach that. You have to actually live it. You have to accept it. And when you have that kind of a mindset, you can learn architecture, and then that can emulate into your practice. But it starts with each and every one of us, how we look at ourselves as Filipinos, right? And I think that would probably be one of the things Dad would really want students to really emulate. It's really love for country.
All right. Clearly, you can't learn that in architecture school. You learn that at home, perhaps as a young child. How did you learn it at home?
Well, us, it was just emulating a father, I guess. From a father and son perspective, it was just watching your dad, seeing the way he would act, seeing what would get him upset. Seeing what would make him happy. It was just growing up with a father who actually lived it and had it in his heart. Whatever he did, whatever he designed, it was always, oh, that's a nice drawing, Jello, but what makes that Pinoy, right? You draw a battleship, well, it's a nice battleship. Let's put some katig in it and make it a bangka battleship. You know, he always had that fun fact ingraining, and it was a constant ingraining of just how do you make it Pinoy? How do you make it Pinoy? And you know, growing up that way, eventually, your mind just kind of locks into it, and then everything you do just starts following that same suit. But I mean, that was teaching from a father to a son, right?
And the great thing you mentioned is that he did it in a very fun way. It wasn't this in-your-face nationalism, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. It was always there was always a fun twist to everything that we would do. It always turned into a game, as much as possible. Even a chore would end up becoming a game, and if it could be related to a fun fact, a fun Pinoy fact, or something that just localized the game, like even simple before we'd get into. I remember I got into billiards and I loved billiards, and then Dad said, "Why are you learning billiards?" And he brought in our local billiards with the ficha and all that, and he built us a whole table and said that's the billiards you play, and we loved it. I mean, it was just always looking at, you like things that are of the West, great. How now do you localize it? And if there's a local counterpart on it, that's what we should learn. That's what we should love. And that was the constant seed that he was planting on our heads as we were growing up to adulthood. Fantastic. And eventually it just went into the architecture, of course. Naturally went there.
And part of that was games. And speaking of games, I want to go to Bambi Manyosa Tanhutco, who has also dedicated a large part of her time and energy to Laro, Awit at Laro, among other projects that she's initiated. And Bambi, question here is about how you've been able and continue to apply the values and principles of your father's career in your own personal advocacies and passions and projects. Like what I mentioned, with the Laro, for example, Kids for Kids, and Museo Pambata.
Well, David, it's much like what Jello was saying, that my dad's principles and philosophy doesn't really just apply only to architecture, but it applies basically to all fields. You know, to all fields. It's really, it starts with love for country. And so when I used to do a lot of arts and crafts in his house, you know, I had my little creative kid studio going on there. Just as he would always tell Jello, so what makes that Pinoy? What makes that drawing Pinoy? You know, he would ask me, why are you teaching them about Van Gogh again? You know, why not our solo? You know, why not? You know, he was always going into what was Filipino. So even with that, he would watch me teach, and then he would say, "Hey, come here. You know, what if we do this sound?" And you know, he'd go on the piano and he'd say, "What if we do this? Let's see how their hands move. Let's see how this, you know, how this kid moves with this and with that." So he was very fond of children. You know, very fond of children. And so when I came up with that closing exhibit of my studio called Laro, he asked me after. He said, "So, you know, this is really wonderful. So what's next?" So I said, "What's next?" I said, I'm coming into your office now." And he said, "No, we have to do one more." He goes, "You know, you have to do music." He goes, "I told you art and music always goes together. So how do we do that?" So he always reminded us all the time that you have to, you know, basically he always said, you know, it really doesn't matter what you take up in college or what you become. The question will always be, what have you done to uplift your fellow man, and what are you doing in contribution to nation building? So when I told him that I was asked in 2017, this was like soon after the exhibit, I was asked to come on board Musea Pambata. I wasn't sure how he would feel about that, and he gave me his thumbs up, and he said, "Go." He goes, "You know, I think you'll do good things." He goes, "Let's start them young. Let's start with the kids." Because, you know, he was always about his barangay, the students. So when he found out I was coming into Museo, he said, "Let's start them young." Because as what Jello said, it becomes very second nature. You know, like we grew up with it, we've lived it, and it's really to us not a fad, not a trend, not a campaign. It's basically really just a way of life.
All right, thank you so much, Bambi. We have time for maybe two more questions. I see two questions that have come in. This one is very practical. Some tips for budding architects or architecture students. Jared, as Bambi mentioned, architecture, at least as Bobby understood it, is so much more than just building structures. There are just so many other parts that come into being an architect. So what are your tips to younger architecture students about what it is to be an architect in our age?
We should be sensitive sa ating kultura, no? So I believe, no, if you look at the career of Architect Mañosa, hindi naman siya yung tahasang kinokopya niya yung bahay kubo. So merong elemento ng ng innovation. So imitative sa una, pero merong kakawing na innovation na mangyayari. So yung pag-discover ng bagong material, no? Of course, these are technical, no? But hindi natin kakalimutan lagi na ibinabahay natin, no, ang Pilipino. So ang kulturang Pilipino ang dapat mapaloob, no, sa programang arkitektural na ginagawa natin, hindi yung mga foreign frameworks, no. So kahit anong pa yan, kahit anong lingwahe pa yan na binaraw natin sa ibang bansa, lagi nating iisipin na ang building na to ay para sa Pilipino at kailangan nating i-appropriate ito batay sa hinihingi ng klima, ng kultura, at mga habits ng mga Pilipino. So, si Bobby Mañosa, lahat ng ginagawa niya, Filipino. Pero, hindi, not necessarily trapped, no, doon sa nakaraan. No? But, laging merong innovation. Looking forward.
Thank you, Jared. Jello, nabanggit ka ni Jared, yung bahay kubo, no? And I just want to tie it into what JC Pagunsan, is it? Yes. Who brought in a question here. Yes, JC Pagunsan. Yun nga, no, sabi nga ni JC, Philippines owes a lot to your father, especially the concept of the bahay kubo in architecture. Sariling atin nga yan, ano? The question, however, is how to translate his vision, no? And this Bahay Kubo in the 21st century. And interestingly, and I wanted to ask the same question, in the new normal, when we're thinking about not just sustainability, but health and safety, Jello.
Yes, how one translates is actually really the journey of why Dad really looked at this whole exhibit of why Filipino, no? The way Dad would look at architecture before is he would look at the fundamentals of the Bahay Kubo, the fundamentals of what made it adaptable to our climate, hot, humid climates. And the journey of his architecture was how to innovate and how to expand and how to be creative and how to make it acceptable and how to elevate the Bahay Kubo to the next level. What is next for Philippine architecture? That was the journey. That was really the journey that he took. And if you look at the years per decade that he actually practiced architecture, you can see the style has actually changed quite a bit. And it's changed from the 70s, from the 60s, 70s, the 80s, 90s, up to 2000. You can see the trend. And that's really part of the man's journey. I think each and every one of us in our architectural career will go through such a journey. And that's something that each of us really have to figure out what then would be our own personal identity of what makes that journey unique to us, uniquely ours. For Dad, it was uniquely Manyosa. For myself as well, I'm still constantly I'm emulating, and I'm also still constantly seeking for answers every time a new project comes in, a new way to build a house, a new way to use a material. It's always a journey, and many times it's also convincing the client to join you on that journey, because some clients are not very accepting or they're not willing to take the leap with you, right? And that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun of architecture. But at the end of the day, you like I said, you have to have that mindset. You have to have that mindset that it's the type of practice that you want to do. It's not the type of, today with Instagram, Pinterest, and all the technology we have in the world, it's very easy to look at what is the latest trends, take that idea, copy it, and then call it yours, right? And admittedly, I'm sure there are many architects and students out there that if you're given a plate to design, let's say, a hospital, the first thing they do is Google, cool hospital designs or trendy hospital designs, and you'll get 1,000,001 hospital designs, and then you can start picking ideas, and before you know it, you have your hospital, right? But to invent a hospital, to invent a new way of looking at it, to invent a new way of designing it, is actually quite difficult. Like Dad would always say, copying an Amarsolo is very easy to do, but can you design an Amarsolo? Can you make an Amarsolo painting? That's a completely different thing altogether, right? So, if I can just put that in a nutshell, again, it has a lot to do with the attitude that we have with architecture, what we want to practice, and then practice architecture. So you really have to feel it in yourself to say, I want to design Pinoy, or I want to design Pinoy tropical architecture. That's my goal, that's my thinking. Or I want to just focus on bamboo architecture, and that's my thinking. You can even say, I'm just going to focus on coconut or rattan structures or whatever it is. But whatever you end up thinking and locking into your head, that will be your journey to reach what your next great project will end up becoming or looking like, right?
Let me just end this conversation with you. And still on the same question about the Bahay Kubo and your father's, how your father would have translated this into the present century. And in particular, not just the present century, but this particular moment in our history, which is the pandemic. The whole concept of Bambi, because you're also an interior designer, let's not forget that, no, Bams? Ventilation, sunlight, windows, people are now talking about this all over again, right? Because of the pandemic. And studies have shown that this helps. These are healthier environments, which are more resilient to viruses. Tell us about the new normal in architecture from your point of view, Bams, in relation to the Bahay Kubo and what it stands for.
Me?
Yeah, both of you. Actually, I think it's a great question. Yes, Bams, from an interior designer's point of view, and maybe I'll end with Jared as the curator of the project.
Let me try to answer that quickly. Yeah, let me try to answer that quickly. You know, if you look at the past of the way let's just talk about the Bahay Kubo, okay? The Bahay Kubo is a one-bedroom house. It's a one-bedroom house where everything is within the same square. You have your kitchen, yung tulugan, you've got your living room, your area of study. It's all in one room, right? And a lot of the trends for houses, at least since we're talking about the Bahay Kubo, is to have open spaces, contiguous spaces which kind of blend from living, dining, kitchen. It's all within one space, and you want large windows for hot, humid climate. So that has been the trend for the past maybe 3-4 decades easily, right? But when you go back to the maybe late 50s, early 60s, we were compartmentalizing our rooms. We had the living room, we had the dining room, we had a family room, we had a place of study. It was all compartmentalized. In the 70s and 80s, those walls started breaking and it all started becoming one large space. Now, with the pandemic, the way I see it is slowly we're going to start beginning to compartmentalize our rooms again. A lot of it is really because, again, you have the social distancing and whatnot, but there are many trends today which hamper regular life. The way life moves. For example, I personally have to have my meetings with my clients, and it becomes a little crazy when I try to sit down without an office within my living room, and I've got my kids running around chasing dogs, and people are moving back and forth. So you're looking for your own privacy, right? People are starting to work out within their houses as well, so they're looking for their little gyms and little places to work out. So they want an area just to do their little exercises. People are looking for garden space because people are, if you look at gardening now, it's becoming quite a bit of a trend. So people are looking for spaces, whether it's to put pots in a windowsill of your apartment building or whether it's a small patch of land. People are just looking for all these little compartmental spaces to be able to segregate and separate. And if someone gets sick, you can quarantine. So more and more, we're seeing the current trend now. It seems to be, rather than large open spaces, we're going to start compartmentalizing. But I don't believe it's going to last too long, though. Mm-hmm. If we really do make it out of this pandemic, one way or another, although things will be different, I do believe that people will still prefer the large open spaces versus compartmental spaces. Now, unfortunately, not everybody has the luxury to do that, right? If you live in an apartment, 16 square meters, I mean, what do you do? So you now have to start compartmentalizing your furniture in such a way that you can have, transformer furnitures, which is a bed that closes up into a desk, and you can convert your bedroom into an office, or you can convert your living room into a kitchen. And doing transformer type furnishings on smaller spaces becomes a trend. If you have a bit larger space, then using light wall partitions becomes a thing. And if you've got the luxury of really large houses, then it's really a matter of subdividing your structures, right? The Bahay Kubo in a way was like that, somewhat like that, where you actually had the one bedroom above and then the silong underneath. And the silong was really more for the animals, but eventually the silong became a space for other uses, kids playing and whatnot, especially during the seasons, as the seasons changed. So a Bahay Kubo in itself is very versatile in terms of being able to shift and change as it's needed. and you could even bayanihan that structure and take the whole structure and bring it to a different location if you wanted to, right? The Pinoy house, I think the Pinoy house would be kind of like that, in the sense that it's a very versatile space. It can move around, it can change, it can shift. But unfortunately, with the pandemic, people had to do it in a matter of weeks, to self-adjust. But I do believe, and I do hope that it is temporary, but it definitely will not go back to the way it was from the old normal.
It's testing our resilience and testing the resilience of our own architecture. Bam, sorry, yeah, I was going to ask you that same question. If there's anything else you'd like to add from a designer's point of view about, from a MAñOSA point of view as well, about this new normal in architecture, in interior design.
Well, with the new normal, just as Jello said, it's trying to figure out how to compartmentalize everything with what's going on. Although there are also some homes, not all homes have that luxury of space, right? As he was saying. So I think it's still important, even if, people have more humble homes. The whole concept of the bahay kubo, where you have cross ventilation, where people don't want to stay in one area with, people coughing or feeling sick or symptomatic. You always want the air to be able to, to go through the spaces, right? You want to be able to have sunlight, coming in. You want to be able to have, those awning windows where when it rains, you still have, it's still very maaliwalas. I guess that's one of the things that Gerard was saying, one of the distinct designs that, or feelings that, you would see in the projects are actually that it is very maaliwalas. So all of a sudden now in the pandemic, everybody wanted to be outdoors, right? Everyone wanted to be outdoors, or they brought plants inside. And I was actually telling Jello, I was just so surprised how all of a sudden it became such a trend. Plants became a trend when we grew up with it. So parang I was kind of naaliw with the whole excitement of people having plants and planting things and all that. And I think that's also, it's great because it's food security, and it's something that my dad always said, it's having your own little bahay kubo, and you don't have to have such a big garden space, but growing your own little gulay and growing your own fruits in your house pretty much, helps. It really does. So it still goes back to that concept.
Self-sufficiency, yeah. Your dad was a visionary. He's anticipated so many things that we're experiencing today. And Jared, just to end with you, anything in this book that anticipated the new normal, you think? I don't want to force the issue because the context of this book was different from the pandemic, but, architect Bob was such a visionary. What do you think did he anticipate that we can apply today?
Of course, the notion of cross ventilation, yung pagiging maaliwas. We must remember that the bahay kubo, belongs to its location, So it blurs the boundary between the exterior and the interior. So yung claustrophobia na nasa loob ka, binabasag ng spatial concept ng bahay kubo. So nandyan yung virtue ng cross ventilation, sunlight as a disinfecting agent. And di ba, pag umaakyat tayo ng bahay kubo, naghuhubad tayo ng tsinelas, di ba, bilang respeto doon sa may-ari ng bahay. So, yung mga ganong ay it seems to anticipate yung sanitary dimensions ng contemporary architecture na kinakaharap natin ngayon. Na kailangan responsive sa pandemya. So, yung pagiging malinis, kasama naman yan sa sa kulturang Pilipino. At yung bahay kubo nga is an epitome of of really cross ventilation kasi in a ideal na interior space, kailangan hindi enclosed Kailangan negative air pressure yung nandun. And ma-achieve ito ng isang humble na bahay kubo. Amazing. So, let us not forget the virtue of the bahay kubo. Its tropicality and its culturally responsive dimension.
Respect indigenous Filipino architecture. Thank you so much. It's 6 o'clock. Actually, it's past 6 o'clock. That's all the time we have. If you have any more questions, I think that to Tukod Foundation has a Facebook page, right? You have a website. If you want to continue this conversation, you can always do that by checking for updates and just seeing for any new information on the website. In the meantime, I'd like to thank our presenters, Jared, Architect Jared, thank you so much. Of course, he's the author of this book and the curator of the project. Architect Jello MAñOSA. Jello, thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank you, David.
And Bambi, thank you also for sharing your wisdom with us this evening. And of course, to all of you who have been watching for the past hour and listening in, taking notes, asking questions, thank you so much for participating in this wonderful event. You know, we all wish, Bambi, Jello, and Jared all wish that this were a physical event, but because of the, I guess, the new normal, we can't do that. But hopefully we'll have another one soon. And this time we'll be in front of each other in an actual physical exhibit. So thank you so much. And speaking of the book, you can get a copy of MAñOSA Beyond Architecture. This is what it looks like from the Tukod Foundation Facebook page. There's information on how you can order it there. You can also order online at the Facade Books online bookstore. Please do. It's a beautiful, wonderful book. And apart from that, there's just so much to learn about the vision of the man we celebrate and this evening, Architect Bobby MAñOSA. So thank you all very much for joining us. I'm David Saldran. Have a good evening and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Allow me to congratulate you and thank you for your contribution to the practice of architecture in our country. We consider you as an icon, as a legacy. What you have done will go beyond the books.
Through design that really identifies the culture of the country.
There's not enough words to describe what you've done, but I think the most appropriate one would be legacy. If there's one architect who will perfectly depict Philippine architecture, it's you.
Architecture must start with that Bahay Kubo. And through this Bahay Kubo, we must evolve simply because it's an indigenous house.
I think you got across finally to the Filipino why you have been so passionate about Filipino architecture.
The use of indigenous materials has always been a passion for me. It's now an upliftment of what the bamboo is or what the coconut tree is all about. Mm-hmm. The main thing behind this is to accept the material and get all of us in unison to just say what is ours is beautiful.
Tito Bob, I love you so much, and I was so happy to be part of this celebration of your 86th birthday. And I know that Daddy is looking down at you and smiling and very proud of you, Tito Bob. Love you from MAñOSA, San Juan.
Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you were happily surprised by what you saw today. This is actually maybe just 1/4 of your archives that we put out here. I was actually very, very pleasantly surprised by what we were able to find, and seeing everything, we realized that this cannot just be a one-time exhibit. I think we need to go through several more because there's so much more to show about your life and your work and everything you've done out there to share your blessings with others.
Just like Una, Hidalgo, and the other artists in the museum, Architect MAñOSA is, of course, a man who is truly passionate about his craft and unapologetic about his pursuit of excellence.
Father, we thank you for the gift of Bobby to our country. Thank you because through his designs, We keep our national identity intact in our hearts.
Here we see project speaks louder than words.
I hope all the architects, the young architects, come to know what it is that you have been doing.
The people around you, the people who follow you, the people who admire you, these are also a reflection of who you are and what you have done and what you have contributed.
Masaya po ako at ngayon meron po tayong isang exhibit na ganito na kung saan pwede naming imbitahin ang aming mga estudyante sa School of Architecture nang makita nila kung ano ang ating pwedeng gawin para magkaroon po talaga tayo ng isang Filipino identity.
His body of work has steered and moved a generation of architects and has become a cornerstone, pillar, and pinnacle of Philippine neo-vernacular architecture. His architecture is a poetic response to the philosophical question of his career, why Filipino?
When you continue to share your passion for music, and the type of passion that you shared with us with your music is the same type of passion that we are seeing here now with this really, really important and historic display of your architectural works.
One, you must accept you're a Filipino. Two, you must accept that you must love the country. And third, let us practice architecture.
In fact, I am just humbled and grateful and thankful that I had the chance to step into your firm and be able to see your projects and be able to create with you.
One eye must see architecture, the other one must feel. There's no other way you can design Pinoy. You must feel it. You must know you are a Filipino.
His design, his architecture, his Filipino house, the Filipino spirit that he just keeps alive through generations. And I thank him so much for this timeless legacy that he's giving us.
Happy birthday, Bobby. Wasn't this a great surprise for you? 86, wow.
We, the Filipino architects, are grateful and thankful for your contribution. And rest assured, we as your witness will continue that legacy and make sure that it is applied, it is implemented, and it is ingrained in our designs. Thank you, Tito Bobby, for everything that you've done. You've done remarkable things, and it will greatly be appreciated.